there are only 5 whiskies you need to own, so you could save your money. So this is going to be a great gift guide. It's going to be a great way to show you how to build a whiskey collection. It's going to be a great way if you're a whiskey beginner to show you how to taste whiskey flavors and which kind of roads you can kind of go down to make kind of shopping for whiskey a lot less confusing. So I'm Phil, I'm going to fill you in about whiskey, and these are the 5 whiskeys I think you should have on the shelf. Been a different type of 5 whiskeys video going around, which was like the daily dram, the Friday night sipper, the special occasion. This is not that video. So recently I've often talked about the 3 categories. So what are they? So they were the light and fruity, which is kind of like your ex-bourbon cask whiskies, rich and round whiskies, which are kind of like your mostly sherry cask whiskies, and your peaty and smoky whiskies. I've always talked about if you try at least one of these 3 categories, that's a great start. Thing is, I felt like there were 2 categories missing from there. The earthy, the chemical, the heavy funk side, and then you've got the wood and grain, especially from bourbons. So there's still going to be exceptions to the rule, but I think these 5 categories work way better. What I'm going to do on this is kind of give you some great recommendations for each, so that whoever you're buying for, I'm sure there'll be something on this list that they'll like. So the first type of whiskey on this list is that light and fruity, the fruity and floral. And this is one of the big gateways to Scotch. It's kind of like the most fundamental version of like a single malt. It's in like an ex-bourbon cask. It's not got like heavy kind of cask influence, not smoky as well. I'll definitely go for the Arran Sauterne casks. Arran, I always find, is a very kind of strong kind of orchard fruit type whiskey, and the Sauterne cask being a sweet wine from Bordeaux, especially if you're ever in France, go get yourself a Sauterne, and it's like this like sweet, syrupy, really nice wine. I always get a lot of like really tropical flavors, and you can see that carried over into this whiskey. So the next whiskey in that light and fruity and floral category is sort of a backup option. I actually think is quite underrated. I think what happened is a lot of people tried this distillery, it's a newer distillery, quite early on, and I think when it came out, some people were like, oh, it's a bit spirity, not so sure, and haven't actually returned to it. And I had talked about this before, but it's going to be the Lindors. I can see that it's also aged in some wine barriques, and you can definitely see just a touch of those dried fruits coming through, but it's mostly in that sort of floral orchard fruit. It also makes a great sort of gift because of the bottle design. There's a whole history behind Lindors, the name of it. Go watch my History of Scotch video if you haven't watched that. We're on to the next flavor profile, and I find a lot of people lean into this direction. They love a sherry bomb. A lot of these are going to have that sort of Christmas cake and dried fruit, the rich, dark kind of chocolate, and you know, that sort of ex-sherry cask kind of whiskies, the spiced whiskies. It's going to be a whiskey that did really well this year in the online Scotch Whisky Awards. It's going to be the Glengarry 12. This is 48%. Look, it's not a sherry bomb, but I just think in that lane, if someone likes a Bunnahabhain or something, this could be a good whiskey to recommend. Yeah, straight away you're getting a lot more of those classic sherry kind of notes. You're getting some of the dried fruits, the spice. But what I like about this, it is that nice blend. A lot of whiskeys are kind of like full out sherry bomb, and this kind of just takes us back a little bit this way to a lot more of that malty, a lot more of that light and fruity. We're going into the smoky whiskey category. A lot of people are like smoke heads. They're like Kilhoman Snag, when I talked about it being my like whiskey of the year last year. On Discord, we call it the Snag Gang. Great whiskey. I'm not actually going to talk about the Snag because I think a lot of you now, just through me talking about lots, probably have already tried it. So the first one on this list is a whiskey outside of Whiskey Tube. It's not super popular. Inside Whiskey Tube, this is really popular. People who know where to find good value whiskies know about this whiskey. This is the Lechaig Sinclair series. So Lechaig is a whiskey from the Isle of Mull. It's not from Islay, and it's a smoky whiskey. What I like about this though is that, yeah, it's smoky, but it mixes kind of that second category with this category. And it's aged in ex-Rioja Spanish casks. And there are some people who are a little bit more kind of purist with single malt. They're like, oh, nah, you shouldn't put wine casks with whiskeys. Just second fill ex-bourbon cask. That's all you should have. This is one of the whiskeys I like to show those types of people. But really what I love about it is the price point. You can get around the same price in New Zealand as the Lechaig 10, which is also a banger. If you're not really keen on the wine cask or the rich side and you want to go more kind of like the ex-bourbon cask side, go for the Lechaig 10. But both of them are going to be very smoky. Yeah, it's just a cracking good drama. It's nice. You got the smoke, the bonfire, the peat, the like meatiness, and then it's got this nice kind of balance of like, interesting. It's sort of like You know when you have like a steak and you're pairing it with a wine, it almost is, it's the red fruit coming in on it. But I think people are forgetting about this one. And the one I want to recommend is this here, the Wolfburn. If the person you're buying for, or if it's yourself, maybe not a big peated person, you want to try a smoky whiskey, but you don't want to feel like you're smoking a cigar, this might be the way to go. It's got that touch of saltiness, it's very malty, and then the smokiness coming through. It's like you're sort of further down the beach and you can kind of see someone's got a campfire going on over there, and you're not right up close, but you're just a bit further back, and that's kind of what this is. But let's move on to the third smoky whiskey, and this one was actually one that was recommended when I did YouTube roundtable and we talked about no age statement in whiskey. One of the guests there recommended this one here, a Talisker, but not the Talisker 10. This is going to be the Talisker Port Rouge. So again, this bit like the Port Rouge, I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, but look, I can show you what tastes good. I can't promise you I'm going to pronounce it right, especially with my weird accent. Here's one thing: if you ever meet a New Zealander, ask them how they pronounce 3 different things. Firstly, a grizzly bear, you're barefoot, like you got no shoes on, barefoot, and you're having a beer, like drinking a beer. The thing is, we like pronounce them all the same way. But this is the Talisker Port Rouge and aged in some port casks. It's very much in that dried fruit lane, even more so than like sherry is, but it's got this kind of nutty and spiciness to it. But port always is like that raisins I always get. Kind of sea profile, the ocean, the salt, but it's got that warmth, the sweetness of the port that comes through as well. So if you're going to buy 3 whiskies and you haven't tried much whiskey, buy one of each of those categories, and I guarantee there's probably one you lean to. And a big part of my channel is helping show you that, but I've always been like, okay, well, there's this chart that can kind of help you, and some are really helpful, to be fair, but I feel like there's room for something different. A lot of you, like, you're not in the industry, you're not like doing, I don't know, analysis of tasting notes. You just want to know different flavor profiles. You can geek out a little bit, but you can also just drink casually, and it's fun, which is why I made my own flavor chart. And so the thing is, with a lot of charts, like, you don't really know where to start. This is like, you obviously start with the whiskey. Start with the whiskey. And then you go through the big categories, what we just talked about, the 3 we've shown you so far: rich and spice, fruit and floral, peat and smoke. And then you've got 2 more, which the next 2 whiskies we'll talk about, the wood and grain, kind of a lot of bourbons have this, but there are some like very malty kind of cereal scotches as well. But most whiskies will share kind of different flavor profiles. And then you have the heavy funk. This is like your sulfur, industrial, farmy, kind of savory notes. Let's talk about that wood and grain category. I did a recent video on the top bourbons for kind of a Scotch lover. Not a rare breed, it's not a Wild Turkey 101. It's from the same distillery. It's the Russell's 10. So this one's 45%, so it's just a little bit older, and it just has a few more levels of complexity to it. It's just a really nice bourbon. I feel like what I'm learning with the bourbon scene is there's a lot of hype around it, a lot of marketing, the allocated stuff. At the end of the day, you can actually get great value bourbons at a good price that almost get overlooked for how cheap and available they are sometimes. I guess a little bit like the Glengarry, like in Scotch, we can kind of overlook some of those just like classic good whiskies. And I think this is in that lane. It's going to be the Knob Creek 9. It's your classic bourbon notes, the maple, the brown sugar, a little bit of cherry. It's just that nuttiness. Final flavor profile is the heavy funk. And I do find as people go down their whiskey journey, they have ex-bourbon cask, the sherry cask, and then they try the smoky whiskies, a lot of them end up as their favorite flavor profiles of all of these being that heavy funk profile. So the first is maybe not so much, I'd say, in the heavy funk category, still kind of really interesting. And this one I can actually get for a good price. It's from the Flora and Fauna range. It is the Ben Rinnes 15-year-old. So the thing is about this is that I wouldn't put this in that kind of light, fruity and floral. I mean, there's probably notes in it that are similar, but really to me, this is a really meaty whiskey. And it's got this real kind of heaviness to it. If I was to go through the flavor tree, it's got that umami, kind of onion, the garlic, the mushroom. And that's a really interesting note. I haven't had that on many whiskeys. And I think that's what makes this whiskey so interesting. This is a whiskey I have talked about a lot, but I think if you're buying someone who really likes whiskey, or for you yourself, you can't go wrong with the Ben Romick distillery. Honestly, I feel like, personally, this is the thing with having a whiskey channel, is that you learn that everyone has such different palates. Such a huge part of understanding whiskey is understanding the flavor profiles, because all of you, just like you all prefer different types of food, whether it's like Japanese cuisine or like Indian, like everyone's got a different kind of palate. And overall, out of all the whiskies in my collection, I think the Ben Romick Cask Strength would be that like always on the shelf. I love this stuff. Oh yeah, it is that funkiness. What is it? Okay, in heavy funk, we definitely know it's in that lane. There's definitely something sulfury. The burnt match. All right, got one more backup for you. It's going to be the Craigellachie 13. This again is that kind of in that heavy funk zone. When I was in London, I went to a bunch of different whiskey shops, and I actually asked the store owners, the people who worked there, the ones that were super knowledgeable, and I was like, well, what's your personal always on the shelf whiskey? 3 different people said the Craigellachie 13. So I think for those people who love whiskey, you can't go past it. I could still get the lemon, the apple, but there's this heaviness to it. In the same way the Ben Romick has. I might start something. I'm going to nominate some whiskey YouTubers. What are the 5 whiskeys you would pick? The first is a YouTuber they actually shouted me out quite a few times. They just seem really nice. It's a father and son duo. They're called SLB Drinks. They mainly focus on bourbons, but what I like is that they're open-minded. They also try ryes, they try single malts. It doesn't have to be single malts. I mean, maybe there's, when you think of the word rich and spiced, is there bourbons that fit in that maybe? I'm going to nominate, I don't know if, Roy doesn't really do like edited videos like I do, but it could be a good V-pub idea, Roy. And third is I actually did a collaboration with the Whiskey Vault. Daniel Whittington, he got a bunch of whiskey YouTubers on to like release a video about a whiskey that means something to them. If I was with Daniel Whittington in the Whiskey Vault and I said, what are the ones top of your head you come to? And also G Whiskey, I want you to do it, just make it a weird video, but above all, share and enjoy.